I wanted to try and fail to the limits of what I could do, and I wanted to get out of New York. So I wrote this in 2011. And then life intervened, and all of a sudden I got the money together to make another movie. So I did that. That was a movie called The Immigrant with Marion Cotillard and Joaquin Phoenix. And then after that I made another movie, which was The Jungle. So I got kind of distracted. But I was very excited by an article that I had read that NASA was looking for people who were emotionally completely shut down. That they were, because it's going to be 4 people basically in a space, and I've seen the capsule that's going to be going to Mars in 2033. And it's maybe the size where that railing is to the stage. It's tiny. So you got 4 people in there for a year and a half. And so they're trying to find people with what they call schizoid personality disorder, basically people on the spectrum. So I thought, is that good? You're going to have the first people who are walking on another planet who basically have trouble saying hello, which is weird. Now, I don't know. I mean, if I'm kind of a loser, so I do things like I watch press conferences from astronauts from 1969. But I saw a press conference that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins gave right after they were released from quarantine. It was the first press conference they did. And they asked Neil Armstrong some question about what it was like to see the Earth so small and be walking on another celestial body. This is maybe the greatest achievement well, let's forget maybe, the greatest achievement of man ever, right? Walking on the moon. And he said, the lunar module had 6 cubic liters of fuel left in its left booster. He was totally unequipped to talk about any philosophical implications, and that's okay. I'm not criticizing Neil Armstrong. The guy's pretty good. But even so, it would have been interesting to hear some kind of perspective on it. And I just thought, well, they're going to be praising people who, in a sense, have a kind of the easiest form of masculine behavior. The hard part is the cowardice when we face our emotions. So that became the framework. And then I got really pretentious. See, she asked me one question. I'm talking for an hour. It's my first time in Madrid. I'm going to take advantage. Thank you. This is the pretentious part, that I wanted to do the Odyssey from Telemachus's point of view. Now, obviously, the ending is different, but you can see, once you know that, you know how I cheated. I stole from Mr. Homer. Yeah, I thought it was critical. He doesn't get to act with anybody else. He has Donald Sutherland for about 5 minutes, Tommy Lee Jones for 5 minutes, and Ruth Negga for 5 minutes. And then he just watches Liv Tyler on a monitor. This is a brilliant screenwriter you got here. So I faced a very difficult challenge, and the only way you try to get interiority, if you want to use that word, is with some kind of voiceover. Maybe there's another way to do it. It's interesting. Orson Welles was the first person to try and do Heart of Darkness, and he had this whole plan that he was going to shoot the movie in first person. There's a movie that exists called Lady in the Lake. It's a film noir from many years ago, but it's where the camera is a character. And Orson Welles was going to do that, where the audience was Marlowe. Needless to say, he didn't make the film, and if you ever see the Lady in the Lake, it's not very good. You can't really do that. So what's the option that we have to try and get the inner monologue? It's voiceover. Now, Mr. Terrence Malick, whose work I really admire, he's kind of now monopolized voiceover. So the second you put any voiceover in your movie, somebody says, that's very much like Terrence Malick. So, guilty. It's like Terrence Malick. But it was the way that I felt to gain access into what he was thinking. So Darius is a great artist. He's great. He's so fixed and tough in the best way. I remember at one point, the last film we did together was called The Lost City of Zed. We were in the middle of this horrible river where I saw a caiman, a small crocodile, a family in the family of crocodiles, and I said, I think we should get out of the river. And he said, no, I have to stay here, the light. I said, let me tell you something, I'm going to go with worse light in about another half an hour. I just saw a caiman, and it's right behind Robert Pattinson. And he said, no, it's okay, they don't like people. So that tells you his commitment. He said, no, half an hour do you have the clouds, they come in and then they block the sun and it's not the same on good light, it's not good. James, are you a filmmaker? You don't worry about caimans. Anyway, Darius went off to do a movie with Bong Joon-ho called Okja, and it was like 300-day shoot, and they were in South Korea for, I don't know, I mean, it was crazy. And so, needless to say, he became unavailable. It was funny, I was talking to a journalist who interviewed me, and he said, did you ask Darius for permission to hire another cinematographer? I said, no. He was going off for over a year with Bong Joon-ho with like big CG animals and stuff. I don't care about what Darius is doing. I'm doing my movie. Anyway, I had written this thing before Interstellar. I happen to be very good friends with Chris Nolan, and he comes over for dinner many Sundays, and he has the greatest family, and I love him to death. And he doesn't tell me anything about what movie he's making because he doesn't tell anybody. You know, he just went off to Estonia to make his new movie, and all I know is he said, how's Robert Pattinson? I said, oh, I like him a lot. Next thing I know, I read that Robert Pattinson is in his movie. You know, it's like he's very secretive, and I would consider myself a good friend of his. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm in a film in space. Yeah, I mean, I have, it's funny, I just was in the Prado today, which is not a bad museum. It's pretty good. I'd never been there. I was a little bit impressed. And I looked at some El Greco, and I looked up very closely at one of the canvases, and the brushstrokes were so broad and long that it was almost like de Kooning up close. And all of a sudden I felt like an idiot because I realized that as a filmmaker, maybe I'm taking the wrong approach. I like to look backwards to try and go forwards. And I feel as though what matters is some core, simple, very mythic elements. So I mentioned the Telemachus thing earlier. Certainly Conrad does play a role, and Moby Dick actually was a big deal for me. And in fact, Tommy Lee Jones at the end of the movie, he says, I never cared about you or your mother, 30 years of eating this food, breathing this air. I never once thought about it. That's stolen directly from Ahab. I just feel as though the more things change in the world, technologically, the more everything stays the same. One of my favorite things in 2001, actually, is all the astronauts come down to see that black monolith that's buried in the moon. It's so genius. They all look at it. They're looking at a version of God, right? And the guy goes like this to take a picture. And it's genius because it's like you try to rationalize and build a structure around that which you cannot make you can't make sense of it. So you have a Kodak moment in front of the monolith. And I was trying to reach back to something pure, simple, elemental, father and son, atonement with the father, father as ogre, and the son transcends, which is a very simple kind of idea. If you want to call that literary, I suppose you can. But the idea was almost like a fable, and to keep it very simple and stripped down, so that, I mean, as horribly egomaniacal as this sounds, that people can see it 20 years from now and it doesn't seem really dated. You know, sometimes you see a science fiction movie, and they're like, this is the new computer. It's the smallest computer. It's only the size of a car. You know what I mean? They date really quickly when you focus on gadgetry. And even in the case of 2001, which is one of my favorite movies ever, for me, the least interesting part of the film is the Stargate, when Douglas Trumbull has all the visual effects in the world. For me, the best part of the film is the 9,000 being killed by Keir Delay. All of a sudden, the computer becomes human. And that, to me, is beautiful. Not crystals in space and all that. I don't give a shit about that. So I was trying to get elemental, human. And I thought the contrast between going so far and deep into the darkest void with the smallest, most intimate story would be interesting. I've never seen Solaris. No, I'm kidding. No, I didn't. You know, I love Solaris, but I didn't think of it. I tried to not. Weirdly, we tried to also not think of 2001, but you wind up ripping them off anyway. I can't really speak to Solaris because that guy, he's such a towering figure. It's like saying I painted a picture and I was looking at this guy Van Gogh and I thought, now let's take from him. You know, you can't really do it. I was trying to do my own story, really, to be pompous about it. I was trying to express something personal. If it wound up being like Solaris, I guess it means my life is like a bad version of a Tarkovsky movie. I don't know. It's funny because in the beginning of my life as a filmmaker, I was making, you know, kind of noir movies in New York, but I was basing them all on my own experiences, my father's experiences, and people said to me, yeah, it's just like you're ripping off Martin Scorsese. I kind of thought, oh, God, I'm trying to be personal. I guess that means my life is like a bad version of a Martin Scorsese movie. But, so I can't really respond. I can only tell you that I tried to put it out of my head, weirdly enough. I'm sure there will be similarities, but you can't avoid it. These are the touchstones of the genre. It's like saying, you know, you're making a boxing movie and, you know, it looks like there's aspects of Raging Bull. You know what I mean? There's certain things you can't avoid, you know? So I'm sorry to disappoint you. I tried not to think about it at all. And in the process, I'm sure I ripped it off completely.